All right, and we're live. Happy Thursday. Welcome to our weekly No Code Ops community show. Today's event will see David Foreman. He's a Chief Automation Officer, and he will be showing us all about Zapier or Zapier, tomato, however you'd like to call it. And I'm really excited about this event because Zapier is one of the tools that are most used by our operators in the community. So I'm very intrigued to see all the tricks that David has prepared for us. So today's session in particular will be really good for beginners because I think he's going to start off with a general overview of the tool and what its uses and how the best case studies for it. And also we're going to delve into something a little bit more advanced for our more expert users as well. So without further ado, let me get into our metaverse. Let me get into the Gather Town. Here we are, and join them onto the stage. All right.
There Zapier,
we go.
Or how many of you can actually, or sort of already use Zapier and trying to maybe get some more advanced techniques?
Hi, David. I was just introducing the event onto the YouTube. Just gave a brief introduction on yourself. Like, I know you're a Chief Automation Officer. Maybe you want to tell us a bit more about that role. And then,
I'm a dev, I guess, originally. I sort of I come from a coding background. A full stack developer is, I suppose, what people would say. And then moved into more operational roles and found no code, and in particular Zapier, but a bunch of, well, all no code tools really. And I use Zapier almost as a programming language. So I kind of replaced the need for me to code now with Zapier. It's that powerful. And so I've kind of turned my back on coding. That's not true, because it's like low code. It's really handy to be able to nip into code every now and then. But by and large, I try to use no code tools as much as possible now and avoid coding.
That's fantastic. And you're one of those people that I refer to as our superheroes in the community, because like Fraser as well, like coming from a full stack development kind of background and then landing into no code, you kind of have it all. You have all the knowledge, so it's exciting to have you here and like to just help us share that knowledge with other people and empowering the remaining folks on Earth that don't know how to code and like still achieve amazing things with these tools.
Well, I've given myself a kind of crazy ambition of potentially teaching you guys a bit of code today too, alongside Zapier, because I think it's really cool to see what it's actually doing. It's kind of, these no code tools are all running code in the background, right? So it's kind of cool to see the connection between what the code is and what the no code tool is doing.
That's even better. All right, so I can see your screen. You're sharing.
Great.
Yeah.
Should I just kick off?
Yes, please do. And I will let you know if there's any questions popping up in the chat or on YouTube. And yeah, hello to all the people that are here joining us today.
I just asked in Gather Round. I don't know how many people are coming at this, like total noobs. They don't know Zapier at all. This is the first time they're ever going to see it. And how many people are actually, they've used Zapier quite a lot and are trying, maybe trying to learn something new. I named this sort of 0 to 10 in Zapier because it's going to be something for the noobs. So if you've never heard of Zapier before, you'll definitely see what Zapier is all about, and you'll get a sort of an idea of why you might use it. But if you've already used Zapier, and then there's definitely going to be something for you too. And it's going to go, as I say, 0 to 10. I'm going to go to some fairly complex stuff in Zapier, just so you know. This isn't supposed to be a sort of tutorial of how to use Zapier, right? I'm trying to introduce you to the tool and show what's possible eventually, if you continue to put the effort in to learn it. So fingers crossed that's going to appeal to everybody. I'll just briefly talk about what Zapier is. And I know we had a make lesson also, and that was really, really good. But it's essentially an if this, then that tool, where you have a trigger, some kind of trigger action. So if this happens, and that could be somebody filling out a form, or a new record in a database, or even just a date in time. So like if tomorrow happens, and then from that trigger event, you string a load of actions. So if that happens, so if somebody fills out a form, then I want to do this and this and this and this. The thing that you're doing with Zapier most of the time is talking to different bits of software. It's kind of a tool to connect lots of different pieces of software, which is what you're doing is interacting with an API or an application programming interface. It's computers talking to computers. That used to be really hard. It used to be like really tough. You know, you'd spend half an afternoon writing a piece of API to make a connection. And now with Zapier, it's incredibly easy and it's massively powerful. So it's a really great tool. And typically, so we're going to go through this example here. So somebody fills out a tally form, and we're going to add that record to Airtable, send them an email, and then send a message in Slack. And you might be like, why don't you just start off with an Airtable form? Just because I want to demo Zapier, really. Typically, you're interacting with a database too, as well as sort of a bunch of different tools. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds perfect.
Okay, I'm going to go straight into, well, I'm going to sort of show you Zapier. And if you've never heard of it, Zapier, I don't know, I call it Zapier, but then there's apps. If you've never seen Zapier before, then there's kind of a little bit to explore, but not loads, to be honest. I'm not going to bother showing you the whole UI or the whole dashboard. I'm just going to skip straight into the Zaps bit, which is where... Not loads, to be honest. I'm not going to bother showing you the whole UI or the whole dashboard.
All right, I just muted Jen. Yeah.
I'm going to skip straight into the Zaps bit, which is where the magic happens. These are the Zaps or the triggers, and then a bunch of actions. Because this is where 99% of your time would be spent in Zapier. You basically create a Zap at the top here, and you can see where all the Zaps that you've got once you've got them created. You can turn them on and off, and when you click into them, you click into the editing of that Zap, and probably the only other thing you do is go and look at the history of that Zap to see like what's been happening with that Zap. Pretty much that's all you're going to do in Zapier. So I'm not going to spend ages going through what it is. But we are going to create this example Zap. So I've already created a tally form, which is a really simple online form builder, no code, obviously. And we're going to add it to Airtable, send out an email, and send a message to Slack. And as an example, this could be generically onboarding, right? I've called it just onboarding. It could be onboarding a new employee, could be onboarding a new member to a community, it could be onboarding a new customer or client. So I'm just going to go with sort of generic onboarding. So this is my tally form, super simple. So just name, email, when are they going to start, and then a LinkedIn URL just to show you why you might ask that, or how Zapier could be useful to you.
Shout out to Tally and their amazing forums as well.
Yeah, it's really good. I have to say I'm a Jotform fan, but I know you're a Tally fan, so I thought I'd create this in Tally for you.
That's a nice touch.
I've actually already created this, right? Because I know we're tight on time. So I'm gonna sort of start creating it again, and then I'm gonna stop immediately because I want to sort of race through it. But I want to start just by showing you, if you've never used Zapier before, just how easy it is. You start by creating a new Zap. You ask for the trigger. So we're going to say tally form. If you haven't connected your account, you would connect your account. I already have. You say when there's a new response. So somebody's filled out that form. Here, I've already got my account connected. Continue. It says select a form. So if you've got a bunch of forms, you just select which one. And I'm going to say onboarding. Continue, and then you can test the trigger or skip test the trigger. So that's the trigger bit. So we've got that now, and you can see that I put through a test record earlier on, and you can press continue, and then you would go to an action. What did I say I was going to do next? Airtable. So again, I just select Airtable from the list, click create record, choose your account, which again would be the one you've probably already got set up, or you set it up there. Choose the base. But it's, what I'm trying to show you here is that if you've never used it before, it's super, super simple. Anyone can truly pick it up from scratch. You don't have to think, oh God, I need to go and do a Zapier 101 before I get started. You really don't. So here you just say, what's the name? We're going to put in the name field, and you grab that from step one, so the tally form, and you just grab it.
I guess the
What's the
great thing
email?
as well is that it's very visual. So sometimes people could be a little bit intimidated by new tools or like, as you're saying, get a panic or like, yeah, you need to go and do the Zap and you don't know what that means. Well, Zapier does a great job at just showing you like all the steps, which is for people like that learn visually like I do, it's really important.
Yeah, exactly. I could quite often with no code tools because there's so many out there. You sort of think, oh, that sounds great, but I'll get round to learning it and then I'll start using it. I kind of encourage you to just use it because it's so easy and so powerful, and you'll instantly pick it up and you'll just start saving time. Okay, so I've built the trigger and I've started the first action there, which is create a record in Airtable. So if I press the test record on that, I could go into my Airtable and see it come through, hopefully. A record was sent to Airtable 2 minutes ago. Why are you not coming in then? There is. So it's as simple as that, right? The first bit of this, I'm not going to do the rest because I'm now going to speed us up. Okay, we can save the draft.
No worries, we got time.
And then just to show you what here's one I created earlier. This is the sort of the rest of what this looks like. We've created the record in Airtable. Then I've just connected Gmail next, and you go through the sort of steps and you say, okay, to this person from this person with this subject line, and you can have HTML email, so I've choose plain text just to make it easier. And then again, I'm pulling in the sort of name that they filled out on that tally form. So I'm saying, hi, David Foreman, welcome to the team, regards, and continue. And again, that will then send the Gmail. And then I'm sending a Slack message into a Slack channel just to say, into an activity feed, say, hey, we've got a new member. This person starts on this day. And here's a tiny bit of, well, it's not really, it's kind of markdown code for Slack, which is how you create a link in Slack. And I've included their LinkedIn profile to say, hey, connect with them on LinkedIn. Have I got an example of that? No, so let's fill out the form. I turn that on. Why won't you let me turn that?
If people have any questions, like during the event, feel free to drop them in the chat and I can always jump on my mic and ask them.
Yeah, please do. I'm going to rattle through fairly quickly. So if you've got, if you want me to stop or slow down, or if I'm just skipping too quickly, just tell me to go over it again. That's no problem at all.
No worries. I mean, we've got time,
okay.
So no rush.
You don't know how much I'm going to try and get through.
That's true. Also, considering you're trying to teach us how to code, I mean, I feel like we need a whole new Thursday for that.
Okay, so somebody's filled out that form. My Zap has been turned on, and so all of those steps should wrestle through now. And I can see they have because we've got a Slack message. So I should have a new record in my Airtable. I have a email, says welcome to the team. And then I've got a Slack message, which just says, hey, this person's coming in, and you can connect with them on LinkedIn. So, I mean, it's a really simple example. But it shows you the power of something like Zapier for really repetitive tasks that you're going to do over and over again, especially ones with like multiple steps. And so onboarding is a really great example candidate for doing that.
Mm-hmm. We do have a first question, which is, what is the difference between Zapier and Make?
They're really, really similar, actually. Zapier's a little bit older than Make. Make's kind of the new kid on the block, and is probably stealing Zapier's thunder, to be honest. And I would encourage you to use Make as well. Maybe learn both. But honestly, if you would choose between, I know I'm sort of here giving a talk about Zapier. If you were to choose between the two, I'd say, and you don't know either, I'd say start with Make because it's cheaper. And I think it's a more powerful platform, actually. The reason why you might choose Zapier over Make is because Zapier has more integrations built out of the box. Because they're older, they've basically integrated with more tools. So there'll be tons of tools out there that just haven't got Make integrations, whereas Zapier will have them. It is much easier to get... Sorry?
Yeah, I think that would be the main, like, points of, between the two of them. Like, Zapier does offer a little bit more automations in terms of offering more tools to, it gives you more opportunities to connect more a variety of tools that Make is currently working on, or, they're trying to catch up on that.
Yeah, that's right. I'd say it's a bit easier to get started in Zapier because what I've showed you there is literally it's it, right? It's not it's really, really simple. Makes a little bit harder to get around at the start, I think, sort of a bit more of a learning curve. And there's a couple of things that are nice for sort of power users. So in Zapier, you can have code steps, so you can break out of the Zap and just write code, which is really, really handy for times when you want to do something completely bespoke. And I think in Make, you can only trigger one scenario off a single event. So let's say somebody filled out that tally form. Everything has to trigger off that one event. Whereas in Zapier, I could have many, many different things triggering off that one event, which again can be handy if you want to sort of break down your Zaps or kind of add some redundancy, I guess. Okay, that, by the way, is so we've kind of done that, or I guess I skipped a few steps, but that's kind of the 101 part of this talk of Zapier 101. If you don't know anything about Zapier, that's kind of hopefully that's enough to get you started. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm going to go to we're going to ramp it up quite a bit to more advanced topics. So hopefully the people who have already, that's dead easy for them, and hopefully I'm going to give them a bit more challenging.
Nice.
And introduce you to the concepts of programming. Right. So as I say, I came to Zapier from a traditional coding background, and I use Zapier as a coding platform, essentially. These low code, no code tools are great, but it's really cool to have an understanding of the underlying code. So I thought I'd introduce you to those. And I'm going to screw it down to here.
Bring it.
So there's there's I guess Zapier in itself as app is essentially our function, and it's one big if then function. It's kind of if somebody fills out our tally form, then do these actions in order and then stop, right? It's kind of it's one big function and one big if then statement. There's other things you might want to do. You might want to have a kind of a nested if statement. You could have say, if somebody fills out the tally form, then do this stuff, but then if something else is true, then just do this stuff, right? So we're going to look at that. You probably also potentially want to do, if this happens, then if this one condition is true, then do this. But if it's this instead, do this. So kind of multiple step if statement. So we're going to go and have a quick look at that. I'm going to show you why that's really annoying to do in Zapier. It's really hard to do in Zapier, or it's not hard to do, but it's just really annoying, and a really great workaround to it. And then how you can build functions in Zapier. So you can build kind of reusable modules in Zapier, which really starts to leverage the power of it. So and then if we've got time, I'm going to show you looping, because like another thing you might want to do is say, for all the records in Airtable, do this, and that's looping. But you can do all of these things in Zapier. And if you come from a traditional coding background like me, then that's, all of that there is pretty much what you need to do. So I've made a second version of this form. And this one, we've added a couple more fields. So what's the account type? Is it standard or premium? And have they paid? And I'm going to go back to this one. Now we're going to do a sort of nested if statement, right? So the first one was just one function, one big if then statement. This one's going to be in a nested if to say, if this, then we want to add them to Airtable, but we only want to send them an email and add them, send the Slack message if they have paid. So if our condition is true. So I'll quickly show you how to do that. It's not too much more. That is this one. And all we've done is added a filter in between the sort of add to Airtable and then send the email. So we've just added this really simple filter. I click into edit. And it's a filter step by Zapier. So it's kind of Zapier's native bit of functionality for you. And it just says, if the paid field on our tally form contains yes paid, then continue. And if it's not paid, then it won't happen. So that's kind of as simple as that, just to get this nested if statement, which is great if you just have one if, right? So it's great if it's just one condition. So a Boolean value, it's called a checkbox value, I guess. But what if we wanted to have different conditions? And in this scenario, we're going to say, okay, if they fill out the form, add them to Airtable, add everyone to Airtable. But if they just pick the standard package, we want to send them one version of the email and add them to Slack. And if they pick the premium package, we want to send a separate version of the email and add them to Slack. And then I'll maybe talk about, well, and then we want to do what we did before, which is still, if they've paid, send them a different email, or rather, probably, if they haven't paid, we want to send them a different email. And you might have already clocked why this is really annoying in Zapier, but this is how it's done. So we're going to use, again, it's a kind of Zapier native function. It's called paths. So we're starting with our tally form, adding it to Airtable. I'm still in edit. And then we use this paths sort of native thing. And we're going to, on this path, which I've called if premium, I'm going to say if the account type contains premium, then it's going to do whatever is below. So we're going to send the email. And then I suppose I should have put the Slack step in there, but I haven't. And then I'm adding another filter. So that same filter that we've just seen in the previous step, saying if it contains yes paid, then I send an email. I put a delay in there for a minute just to show you that you can use delays too, because we probably don't, if someone signs up to a new community, but we don't want to instantly hit them with an email because it looks automated. So usually I add a delay of like 23 minutes. So it looks like I've taken the time to write the email. So that's how you do that. And you can add, I think you can add up to 3 paths, which is not that many natively. But if you email Zapier, they'll unlock that for you. I think I've had 8 paths in the past. And then, so once you've created one, you can duplicate the path. That's new functionality for Zapier. It's been really annoying up until this day that you can't duplicate a path, but now you can. And then you would do the same in B, right? Except that you'd use a different email. You'd choose a different email. And why that's really annoying is because what you actually probably want to do is these two might be different. Then we kind of want to pull back onto the same track again. Like this is kind of like what the desired functionality would be really cool, is if we did this, split off into the 2 tracks for standard and premium, and then rejoin, so that we're not having to maintain sort of 2 sets of actions. So like if we wanted to edit this email, for example, in the future, we'd have to go into both tracks, or up to 8, I suppose, if you were to unlock that many, and edit the email in every single one, which is, not great for maintenance. And yeah. I said I was going to teach you the code, and I haven't. Hopefully it's kind of fairly self-explanatory, right? Code is not that it's not that complicated when you read it. So it's like if condition is true, so tally form is completed, then do action. So add to Airtable, and then we've put if condition. So if their status was premium, then send them an email, and if it's standard, then send them an email. And then these 2 do actions here I've highlighted in pink because they're the same, but they're in 2 tracks. So it's the exact same thing, but I have to edit it in 2 different places, which is really, really annoying. And what I actually want to do, and what you can't do in Zapier, is have an end if statement. So these are kind of if statements in code. And normally you can just end the if and continue down your function. But you can't in Zapier. The sort of if just stays open. And so you can't have these actions.
So your code is a kind of a funnel with an ending, right? That's the way I'm seeing it. I'm trying to visualize it. So you have, you pour in from 2 different bottles, and then you have one single end, which is what Zapier is not allowing you to do right now.
Yeah, right. Once you split a path, you can't rejoin a path, right. which I don't know if they'll ever build, but it's kind of really annoying because this is a really simple example. But you will come across it where you want to split paths fairly early, and then you want the exact same thing to happen once you've done that, and you just don't want to have to maintain that. but there is a way. So let me get my, okay. This is the sort of fairly scary looking way to achieve it, but it's really not that hard when I explain it. So we're doing the same thing as at the start. So someone's filling out a tally form and then we're adding to Airtable. And then what we're going to do is this something called a function, right, in code. And I guess that's kind of what a Zap is in itself. It's a function. So a function is something you can call. You can go and say, go and do this, and it'll return some kind of value. And we can build those in Zapier and call it within our sort of single thread. And if we do that, then we can add stuff after we've called that function when it's come back to us and continue with the stuff that we watched before, just on a single track, which makes it easier to maintain. So what I'm going to show you is that we, as I say, fill out the tally form, add to Airtable. We then call a function. We pass a bunch of variables. And in that function, it does the same thing that we sort of wanted to do. So it will split into two paths, and it'll send an email, two different versions of the emails, and then it'll add to Slack, and then it'll return back from that function. So it will close the loop back to here, and then again we can continue down here. And this functionality we're using in Zapier, it's called a sub-zap. So rather than a zap, it's a sub-zap, and it has to be within a zap. And I'll show you what the code means in a second. So I'm going to start off by looking at the subzap.
That's such a tricky word to say. I was trying to think of a better word, subzap.
Oh no, they call it subzap.
Yeah, I know. It's just like, why would you complicate things?
I hope I'm not I hope this isn't. Hopefully, if there are noobs in there, they're not getting scared off from Zapier. And again, this was kind of hopefully there for the Jedis too, that maybe wouldn't have thought of using Zapier like this. So this is a subzap, and it starts off by using you use the subzap function from Zapier, and you start, and the event is start a subzap, and you basically list then a load of variables that you want for this subzap. So I'm going to include most of the information from that tally form. So I want the email address, name, LinkedIn profile, first date, and the account type. So when you call this subzap, you have to pass these variables to it. I'm going to skip that for a second. Ignore that steps even there. We're then doing the... This is not a filter. I've named that filter, and it's now I'm annoyed I've done that because it's going to confuse you. The reason I've named that filter is because I tried to name things as they are, so that it's really easy to maintain afterwards. But it's not a filter. This is a path. So apologies for that. It's a path in Zapier, and so exactly the same as we had before. It's path rules, and we said if it's premium, and we're saying if the account type says premium. And exactly the same as what we just did in the last step, right? Is send the email in Gmail, and this is going to be our version 1, and then send the message in Slack. And then when you start a subzap, what you have to do is, and this is kind of the closing of the loop, closing of the function, you return from the subzap. So again, you would call subzap, and instead of start a subzap, you call return from subzap, and you can just send anything back. Actually, you can send useful information back, but I'm just sending back success, as in that was a successful
you
thing.
See, somebody on YouTube said they didn't know about subzaps. So you see?
Oh, good. You see, hopefully, good.
Sharing the knowledge.
Exactly. I mean, they're fairly new, but once I discovered them, it completely changed the way I use subzaps, because I started to make reusable modules in Zapier rather than, building the same thing in each zap. And then, so you do the same thing on the standard track, and you again sort of return from that subzap. So that's what the subzap is. Remember that. That's what the subzap does. I'll come back to that in a second. And then I'm going to show you how you actually use that in the Zap. I'll go back to our annoying duplication one first. So this is what we didn't want, because it sort of doesn't allow us to have a single track after the split. So this is our version 4, where we're using that subzap. So here we have the tally form, and we use that trigger. We're adding them to Airtable. Then I'm calling that subzap, right? Oh, I need to edit this out. So I select the subzap, which is what I've just called it. It asks for these parameters. So email address, so I'm passing all of those things. And then when I call that, it will go and do all the stuff that we said in the subzap. So it will split the two, send an email, send a Slack, and then it will return back to this point. And now I can have my next filter that says if they've not paid, then send the email. And it's only, I'm only maintaining that email once, or everything else from the rest of this track, right? Because there's probably there could be much more. So what we're actually doing is this. We're saying do this, call a function, go through this, and come back, and then do this. What it actually means is you get this, right? That function is just the sort of sitting in there.
Mm-hmm.
I said I'd try to teach you some code, so I will. This is the sort of really simple top bit. So this is if they filled out our tally form, then do action. So add to Airtable. Let me scroll across slightly. Do action, add to Airtable. Then I'm calling this function, the subzap, and I'm passing the parameters. And that's going to loop out to this function here, right? And we're passing in the email name, LinkedIn, date, and type. And it's saying if this condition is true, so if they're premium, then send them an email, send them a Slack, and return from the function. Otherwise, if they're standard, then do these actions and then return from the function. It's bad code, that. So if there are any coders out there, I know that that's not how it should be, but hopefully for the non-coders, you're like, cool.
So you're teaching us the wrong stuff.
Yeah. There's no such thing as, what I've written there. But anyway. Where am I now? So that is I'm using a subzap there to kind of create an end if that doesn't exist in Zapier. But subzaps are more powerful for doing more than just creating a simple if, end if once, right? You can create, if you use a subzap rather than a zap for stuff that you know you're going to do a lot of times, you can start to create these kind of reusable modules for yourself. An example might be if you were to pass an email address and you wanted to get all of the things connected to that email address, you wanted to go and look them up from your Airtable or look them up from your Jira board or whatever, and try and gather all that information and then pass that back. If you created that in one subzap, then you could, in all your other zaps, you could call kind of enhance this record and do so. And that's how I do it now. That's how I use Zapier. I tend to create subzaps as much as possible, and then like my main track zap will just be calling the subzaps all the way along. I said ignore what I built earlier on, and I'm going to just come back to it. So I said ignore this step, and this is one of the things that is really cool about Zapier. If you are a coder, so if you are kind of coming at it from my sort of background, is there's a sort of general function in Zapier called code by Zapier. You can run either JavaScript or Python, and you can just literally run code in Zapier, including calling APIs and all sorts of stuff, which is massively powerful. Again, so if you need to do stuff that's not native in Zapier, and you just or just want to, here I'm splitting first name and last name, which is really a really simple example, right? I'm putting in the first full name and I'm saying, give me the split the full name on a space and give me the first iteration of it. And then the last names, I'm saying, give me all other iterations after that split. So it could be David Foreman twice, or it could be David William Foreman. And I actually want David and William Foreman. Cool to do that in code because it makes it much simpler. If you try to do that in like the formatter in Zapier, it's much harder and it would take more steps. Okay. So that's that big, just by learning these things, right? The if, then, and the subset things. That's why I think you can replace largely a lot of coding. And because if your objective is to talk to a load of different systems, then I think Zapier is better than than coding it, if you can afford the bills, because it's not the cheapest Zapier. It can get expensive. The last example I wanted to show you is looping through records, which is sort of the other thing that you probably want to do. So this is like a single trigger and an action, but quite often we want to do a lot of things to a record. And the example I'm going to show you is, say in this instance, say in our example here, these people are coming in and we asked them to give us a start date, and it could be a month's time or 2 months' time. Well, let's say we want to send them an email on their first day and say, hey, welcome, I hear you're starting today or whatever. And we want to loop through our entire database of people who've said that their start date is going to be this date. You would use a scheduler in Zapier for this. And that's, again, a sort of native Zapier functionality. So you sort of use a scheduler and say every day, and I'm saying at 7 a.m., do this stuff. And Zapier doesn't call it that. Zapier does, like, if I just use that trigger, Zapier doesn't say up here every day at 7 a.m. It says scheduler by Zapier. But you can rename them, right? And I can't impress on you enough to rename these steps. So this is a bad example. This is me being naughty. This is a formatter where I'm just changing the date format from what it was to a different date. So this is the date format that's being spat out by that scheduler, and I actually want it in this format. And so Zapier has called that date time formatter in Zapier. It's not that useful for me when I want to come back and maintain it. So what you really want to do is rename it and say, like, convert date. Yeah, I'm using scheduler to sort of start my thing. I'm going to say every day at 7 a.m., go and check for new records. Then I'm using a find many records with line item support from Airtable. Again, I'd probably rename that to say find all new starters or whatever from Zapier, from Airtable. And then I'm using, again, another sort of native functionality from Zapier, which is looping. And you can loop through each of these items. And then what happens is you're kind of enclosed in another function, right? So everything that happens after this point will happen to all the records. And all I'm doing here is say, go and update the record in Airtable to say, I've done it. But you might want to, as I say, send an email or send a Slack or whatever you want to do on a looping basis. Don't get too fixated on that particular use case. I kind of want to show you that it is possible in Zapier. Again, I'm going to try and teach you a tiny little bit of code, or at least show you the code. I can't believe I'm doing this on no code ops, right? I'm a big no code fan, but it's really cool to know what the code is.
I think it's really important as well. Like, they will always go hand in hand, and it's you just create a stronger foundation of everything you're trying to build. So I appreciate that.
For sure, I completely agree with you. And quite a lot of no coders, once they really get into no code, realize that actually, if learning a little bit of code would be great. And it is. I encourage that. JavaScript is a really easy-ish language to pick up. So this is kind of what this is doing, right? This is the function is our Zap, and we're saying daily. Ignore those parameters. I haven't edited that. So this is like daily at 7 a.m. for each record in Airtable. Do action, and then go and find the next record. And so it'll keep doing that whilst it's got records in Airtable. Another sort of code thing that you might want to do, or another function or operation in code, is do while rather than for each. So for each would just be, give me 100 records and do it for each of those 100 records. Do while would be, go and find me all the records where they haven't paid, and do this whilst you've still got records, which is a slight nuance of difference, but essentially it's the same thing. It's both looping. Okay, that's kind of my 1 to 10, or 0 to 10. As I say, if you got lost after 0 to 1 and that 101 thing, I apologize. But hopefully you can see that the possibilities are endless. I think I called this automation without limits, right? Mm-hmm. I do believe that there's nothing I've come up against yet that I'm like, oh, I can't do that in Zapier. I've been able to do everything I want and not had to sort of skip out to, I use code steps, but I've not had to sort of give up on Zapier.
Yeah,
So
that's
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 that.
great. That's great. I mean, I said to you, I think we're gonna go 0 to 100, and I believe I wasn't that wrong after all. So yeah, thank you so much for that. I mean, it was a great overview of just like how to get started and how to get more advanced all at once. So that was really cool. Um, what's the best build or the best automation you came up with Zapier?
Um, I, I guess the one I'm most, well, yeah, most proud of, most difficult was automation for a co-working company that I used to work for. So new client that needs to come in, right, moving into the office, and it would typically, before I sort of built the automation, it was sort of 36 steps, very, very manual. Typically, they never get done, so they'd sort of get started. But because you need to come back to them in a couple of days' time or a week's time, they just never get to the bottom of that checklist. And so I fully automated that. It wasn't one Zap; it was spread across about, I don't know, 13 different Zaps. But it completely automated the whole process. It brought back around 2,500 hours a year for the company in terms of like manual time, right? So it's a huge saving for them. It wasn't a day task, but it was really cool to sort of have that impact. Because what you're doing is you're giving people back their joyful time at work. You know, they're not doing manual. I've got to save this to the folder and then send this email and all that. That's, you know.
Yeah, that's great. And, talking about people working and especially like we're focusing on operations, what kind of advice would you give to operators? Like, what would be the one thing that could really make a difference in their day-to-day job?
I don't know the answer to that because I think it'll be different for every operation. And one thing I would say is if you're thinking about automation, is don't automate too early. So if you're kind of, in a very, very early business or very early startup or just freelancing yourself, I wouldn't jump to automation before you've got a problem. So I guess kind of make sure that you have a process that exists and do it a bunch of times to be like, oh, actually, that'd be a good candidate for automation. I guess I would typically, I guess, if I was to audit processes or audit operations and think about what I would try and solve, I would write down all of the common processes that you do that are established. So like these are the things, these are the moving parts in our business. And then either look at the ones that you really dislike doing, so the ones that you kind of hate doing and you just wish would be taken off your plate. They're a good candidate for automation, or the ones that are critically important. And maybe onboarding is critically important. Having a really great welcome for somebody is more important than the time taken to set up the automation. Although it's never that, well, sometimes it's long, but it's, simple things are not that long. If it's a highly repeatable thing that you're doing, it's a great candidate for automation.
Yeah, great. That's a great advice. Let me open up here to the people in our community. I don't know if you guys have any questions. Feel free to just jump on your mics or drop them in the chat. I'm happy to see Bubalan, Anna, Yanglin. And also, if you don't have any questions, I have a question for you. Like, have you used Zapier before, or are you kind of intermediate, advanced users? So you can tell us in the chat as well. And let me check the YouTube as well for any questions. But as we wait for those, in terms of no code, like in general, do you have any failures that you would like to share? Like just to encourage people that are maybe starting out, or because that happens even to superheroes like you, right?
Do I have any failures? Well, I don't want to give a really bad answer to that, but you're constantly failing, right? That's kind of the aim, isn't it? Is to fail as quickly as you can so that you learn something. I think if you don't fail, you're not really learning. I don't know that I've got any sort of catastrophic failures. Yeah.
Well, that's a good thing. One day one day you win, one day you learn. That's what I say all the time.
I'm lucky. There probably are failures. There probably are things where there's that hasn't worked. And well, I tell you what, actually, because I was going to give this as a tip. It took me so long to learn, like a way into my Zapier life, to learn that Zapier has 2 Zapier Zap monitoring tools that are really, really useful. And I've sort of put them here, and I was going to give them as a tip, which is one, you can have Zapier monitor your Zaps for you and email you every time there's an error. And another one is if the Zaps are turned off, you can have Zapier email you and say the Zap's been turned off. And I've had these 2 running. So if I go into my inbox, they're not actually, there's none in there. I wonder why. So if I turn that off, for example, I should get an email. And so they're the failures, right? When you think everything's fine because my Zaps are doing everything in the background, but actually it's been turned off for 3 days, and now you've got to do everything you just automated manually. There you go. So I've had an email and it says this Zap's been turned off. It's so easy to do. It's so easy to kind of knock off a Zap accidentally, or if you're collaborating with people, they've accidentally turned it off. So top tip from me is use these 2 Zapier Manager things, which is if there's an error, send yourself an email. I mean, you have to, if I click into them, you have to build the Zap just like you do the thingy. So this says, if the Zap's turned off, then send myself an email. Definitely put them in immediately. The first Zaps you should build are these 2 Zaps. And I can share them, actually. I think if I just share them here.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
You can just, if you share them like this, I think you can just share the link. Then if you click that link, you can just literally use it like this. You go try this Zap.
So you can also kind of create templates of your automations and share them with people?
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool.
So if you click try this Zap, it'll then add that Zap into my Zapier, right? So there it is. And that's a new one. Annoyingly, you can't share the ones which have got code breakouts in. I guess safety, right?
You can share an image, at the end of our session, and we can share that on our socials, because I do think it's really helpful, and it's great to have it and just to look at it, as you're saying, kind of look at the skeleton of what you're building.
Yeah.
Feel free to drop the link in the chat here so that I can share this automation.
Sure. So I think what do I do here? I go to share.
Yeah.
I think I just share this link. I do. But that's one of the Zap monitors, but I can happily share all of them. Can't share my whole account, sadly.
No.
Don't want to change ownership. Share.
I'm just.
And so if you go to those links and you've got a Zapier account, you can just literally pull those straight into your. It won't send me an email. Pull them straight into your Zap account.
Awesome. That's cool.
And my other top tip is great naming from the start, right? I haven't done the best naming because I've been rushing to get this ready. But don't just go with what Zapier names for you. Here I have renamed them because when you come to overview over here or outline, you can sort of see the steps. And once you've got big, long steps, the limit's 100, by the way. I didn't know that, but I built a 130-step Zap before. And then when I tried to turn it on, I realized that the limit's 100 and I had to break it into 2.
Is that for premium users as well?
Yeah. It's just 100 max. To be honest, you don't need to do it at 100. Now I would use sub Zaps anyway. So they'd be broken down into mini functions, I suppose. But that was when I was new.
I guess that's one of the things we could talk about. What are the limitations? Like, what can you achieve in a free plan? What do you really need? I guess do you need essentially a premium plan if you're planning on working with it?
You need you're going to outgrow the free plan almost immediately, which is why Make is a really great alternative, because you can get a lot more done for a lot less money in Make. Mm-hmm. Like a lot more. With Zapier, you can't have multiple steps, so you can have a single thing and add to Airtable as in the free plan whilst you get to know. But if you try to add another step like this, you instantly need to pay. I mean, it's $30. Well, I suppose if you pay yearly, $20 a month. So it's not massive money that, but it's some money, right? And then another annoying thing is once you want to go into paths, so those if statements, and I want to do this for this person, this, then you need a pro account, and so that's a bit more money again. The pricing is definitely more aggressive in Zapier, for sure.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. All right. Well, David, thank you so much for being here with us today. This was really great. And I think, as I said to you at the beginning, it was really explanatory and really helpful to see from 0 to 1. So I'm sure this was very helpful for all our audience, out there. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed your experience here with us. I know you're a member of our community, and I couldn't appreciate it more to have people like you just helping out and trying to share their knowledge with the greater community. I think it's so important, and I appreciate that.
No problem at all. And like I'm here to give, right? I think communities are great. I've learned tons from the community already, so just want to do my bit and give back. So anybody out there that is sort of got any problems with Zapier or having trouble with Zapier, there are my details. Feel free to reach out, right? And I'll happily try and spur you along or get you past your blockage.
Fantastic. Well, awesome. Well, I guess I will see you, next Thursday here, same time, same place, and we'll have Brian Sowers, I think, presenting Subsync or Subsync. All these terms like tomato, Zapier. Come up with better names, people. Come on. All right. Well, take care. And I'm just going to close up the YouTube people. We'll see you next week.